Everybody, Tim here, back with Kate from Generate Magic. Kate and I had a wonderful conversation earlier this year. And for those of you who are longtime viewers of the channel, you'll recognize Kate from participating in some of our group calls, giving a lot of great insights to people. Kate has a background in coaching, in writing, and is one of the more, I would say, eclectic YouTubers I know of when it comes to talking about this manifesting stuff in a very open and non-dogmatic way. So Kate, welcome back. We got a lot to chat about. And how have you been, and what profound insights have you encountered since we last chatted on YouTube?
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I don't know if I would call them, well, to me they seem profound. But but yeah, I like that you specifically said non-dogmatic because to me that's very important because I think for any circle, whether it's spirituality, manifestation, business, I think all too often we see this dogma that starts to kind of pervade these different circles, and people saying things like, "Well, you have to do it this way," or like, "This is the truth." And even just to kind of give a very specific example in marketing, there's something called solo ads. And so there was somebody I was learning from that was saying, solo ads are basically it. That's what you have to do basically if you want to grow your business. And then somebody else was like, solo ads suck. And so it's like, which is it?
Totally.
And I think in the manifestation community, we see this a lot where people are just, either just disciples of Neville and, everything that he says is the law, or you have to visualize this specific way, or you have to do affirmations this specific way. And it just goes on and on and on. And what it all comes down to is sure, it may be true for that specific person, but that doesn't mean it's true for every single person.
Exactly. Yeah, I always like to ask people like yourself, where it seems so obvious, like what you just said, like, why don't more people talk about this? like look at it from this more open-minded way. Like it does still baffle me, yeah, I think, you saw Alex Khan in my chat, I think, on YouTube. And, I asked him the same question. I was like, why does that happen so often, where it's like, this is how you do it, and this is the way? And it's like,
Mhm.
no, clearly it's not that simple, because there's someone doing something a totally different way that's getting the same results, but people are so insistent in this, quote unquote, spiritual community, that there's one way. Why the dogmatism?
That's a great question. And I think in some cases, it that it the person that is acting kind of in this dogmatic way, they genuinely do believe that this is the best way. Like they tried a lot of other approaches, these approaches haven't worked for them. And so now they feel very, very insistent on making sure that other people don't make the same mistake that they did. And so I think in a lot of cases it really does come from like there's a genuine conviction behind it, or a genuine desire behind it. And so I think in most cases it's not like they're deliberately trying to force people to believe something or mislead people in any way. I think there is typically like a sincere intent behind it. And I also feel like for some people on the receiving end of it, that may be what they need. Like some people are like, okay, just give me a clear path. And so
just
I think
just tell me what to
there
do.
are what did you say?
Just tell me what to do.
Just tell me what to do.
Right.
Exactly. Just give me some practical steps.
Yeah. No,
So
that's,
I can understand how in some cases it may be beneficial.
yeah. I remember you commenting very intelligently, saying similar things before. What, like hearing you say that again. I very much agree with you, where I think a lot of these dogmatic manifesting teachers, for instance, since we're this obviously, as you know, goes for business and all aspects of life, but you know, manifesting, we're focusing on a lot of these manifesting teachers. I agree with you. I think they do mean well and they really believe it.
Mhm.
They say, you know, I tried affirmations, I tried being in the vortex, you know, I tried scripting, none of it
Yeah,
works, but SATS works or whatever, you know,
exactly.
and there's all these obviously variations of that. Um, so yeah, I mean, I have to remember your words more often because I get baffled very easily by it. But it is true. Like, you know, we see all the time, you see it all the time, I'm sure too, where like there's a lot of people watching these manifesting videos that think that it's like all intentional scamming or something like that. And
Mhm.
like that's just not the case, guys, like at all. Like I feel like most people who create channels, even if they are very intentionally trying to make an income from it, you know, get
Mhm.
coaching clients, sell courses, etc., I think the majority of them are well intentioned. It's just the majority of them are dogmatic. Like
Mhm.
they're very much like, well, this didn't work, or I tried all these other things, this does work, this is what works, so this is what you should do. And even when they're like, you know, this is what works and it's okay if you don't do it, there's often like this like subtle disparaging of, it's like, well, you don't have to do this, you don't have to do my way, but it's the best way, you know, which is kind of a different attitude than, I mean, your attitude, I think my attitude, and some of the, you know, the kind of people we vibe with in the space that are very much like whatever, like
Mhm.
just do whatever.
Mhm.
Don't listen to us. Listen to yourself. You know, and if you look at it from that way, which is I think how, like, you know, you've kind of basically always looked at it, especially since you started making videos, and same with myself. It's like, all right, we bring this in, we try this, we talk about it, we throw it against the wall, we see what sticks and what doesn't. But it's like it's all cool. Like it's not like I'm an evangelicus for, you know, a certain person or approach, like just whatever is the best for a lot of us, because it's not as judgmental or as, you know, structurally dogmatic.
Exactly.
And you are right, you know, the opposite of that, there are people who need that structure because like they're
Mhm.
seeking it and it's the only thing where they are at that is going to work. um yeah, one thing that I always love that you talk about in a lot of your videos, and I haven't watched a lot of your content recently because I haven't watched a lot of anybody's content except for my own recently. But one thing I always love is how you know, you really emphasize like, you know, you emphasize being in the moment and flow and just like enjoying the expression of the moment. And like if I really am appreciating this moment, it's not about getting anything. It's like I'm here appreciating that moment. And how can I, you know, generate the magic of that more often in my life? How can I get more of that in my life more of the time? Um, can you just touch upon that some, like, you know, how you know, how that first came upon you as kind of like a philosophy or guiding principle, and just how you utilize that in your own life?
Totally. And so it really came out of a frustration with learning like all these different tools and techniques, and not just in manifestation, but in spirituality in general. And thinking, okay, well, if I follow this person's teachings, or if I do this very specific exercise that this person tells me to do, then the heavens will be bestowed upon me and all these riches will start raining down on me. And I literally kind of, even though the logical side of me definitely kind of didn't fully believe that that would happen, there was sort of a part of me that believed it was just kind of as easy as like putting your coin, I like to call it putting your coin in the manifestation machine, and then all of a sudden the money or whatever it is that you want just pops out. And like it was just this very kind of like mechanical process. And it's almost like I was kind of waiting for something to happen to me, or and I'm not even just kind of talking about like external things, but also like I was waiting for this profound like burst of inspiration and all these like channeled messages to come to me. But it was, yeah, it was just this constantly, I I think that the title of that book, for adolescent girls, like, "Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret,"
Right.
I think speaks very well. Like I literally kind of felt like I was like knocking on the door and like just kind of being like, "Okay, God, I'm doing all the right things. I'm, having gratitude. I'm, thinking the right thoughts. Being being high vibe and doing all the things that they say that you're supposed to do. And where is it?" And so it finally occurred to me, and I've heard this, and I'm sure many people watching this channel have heard this many times, that it's all within. And but when I used to hear this, it would make me very frustrated. It was like, well, okay, I get that, but like I still don't get like how to fully integrate it. And like we hear that all the time, like the answers are within you, or the truth is within you, but like what do I actually do with this information? And then for me, and again, this is to go back to the whole thing of like dogmatism, and there's no such thing as a magic formula. I think it's different for everybody. But for me, at least, I found that it's very much like an inside out approach. But there's something kind of very like active about it. And there's very much kind of a process of like integration. And so for me, like dance is like a big one. And so I'll be kind of thinking, so as I'm dancing, I'll be kind of like imagining like certain scenes in my head, not from a like a mechanical, like, oh, this is my imaginal scene, but yeah, just kind of like conjuring up things very like organically. And somehow like the physical movement, it just feels, it all becomes very like integrated. And along with the process of integration, like I found there really, the more and more I live, the more I realize there's no real distinction between the inner and the outer. And so meaning that like everything, like every experience, like every thought, every feeling, it's always like communicating something to us. And so seeing it as just like a constant like interaction and like a constant communication, as opposed to, okay, well, I'm gonna do this technique, and then I'm gonna place my order or whatever, and then I'm gonna wait to receive my order. And so it's very much, I found to be like a continuous process, as opposed to this very kind of mechanical like back and forth process, if that makes sense.
That makes so much sense to me. That really resonates. I think for a lot of people, you'd be like, "What the hell is she talking about?" Because it's like it's such a visceral approach you're
Exactly.
talking
It's
about.
hard to, yeah, it's hard to put in the word because it is very visceral.
And it's, but that's like, I think that's what always drew me to these teachings. Because like you, I've gone down so many rabbit holes with theories, with like, mentally, this stuff's very interesting. You start thinking about it conceptually, and you're like, all right, well, if I do this, this is going to happen. But first of all, when I thought that way and then tried to apply stuff in that manner, it usually did not happen. But
Mhm.
secondly, I think why I got these ideas, what drew me to them almost like instinctively once I started reading Neville and other teachers, but specifically Neville, because Neville is such like a visceral teacher, actually,
Mhm.
so much, and was, a dancer, right?
Mhm.
Like it was the connection between body, basically move something with the body moving or viscerally in the mind, right?
Yes.
So it's like, for me, anyone who's seen like my Stop Being Serious stuff from years ago or read The Joy of Not Thinking knows like how I rid myself of stress and feel good and present and basically become abundant is through movement.
Mhm.
So it's the same thing as like dance or anything that's truly expressive physically. And like that is a direct manifestation. That's like going on right now, 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 now. And it's like the all these other techniques are like toys or something you can hypothetically play with when you're in
Mhm.
that state. Like, but it's like the real magic is that it's like right now,
Exactly.
it's like what's
Mhm.
inner, what's outer. I don't even know. I'm here. I'm alive. I'm
Exactly.
viscerally present. And I feel like, yeah, the more you're able to tap into that, the better you feel. And generally speaking, probably the better a lot of our lives become, the more connected we feel. Um, it's so interesting. It's so much more fun to like look at it that way, isn't
Mhm. Exactly.
it? Yeah. And at the same time something that's very hard to explain. I mean, I think you just explained it perfectly. And it's like, well, there's no technique there. It's just it's like being integrating it, so it's like part of your part of your, it's in your bones or something like that. Like, it's like
Exactly.
we're part of you. Yeah.
And one and so it's also for me this idea of alchemy or transmutation. And so I used to think of it as, and this kind of goes to the idea of like magic, right? I used to think of it as making something out of nothing. Like you would just snap your fingers and then all of a sudden like a big bag of money would fall out of the sky. And whereas alchemy is kind of working with what you already have. And there's a quote from James Allen from The Heavenly Life that has stuck with me. And I may misquote it slightly, but it doesn't matter whether conditions be of this sort or that sort if the form that you give it is heroic or poetic. And and so I love just the way he phrases it, like even the this sort or that sort. And then the form you give it. And so the emphasis is being placed on the form that you give it, the shape that you give it. And so it comes, and there's a lot of, I mean, I think there's even kind of a lot of cliches, right? That actually have like a lot of profound truth behind them, like making lemonade out of lemons. Or I like to call it, alchemizing crap into gold.
Right. Right.
But basically kind of anything can be turned into a beautiful experience. And I like to look at things through the lens of like of art also, since I come from this background of like writing and film. And so when you watch a movie, right, or you read a book, it's not like it's all just one note. It's not, there's moments where there's like challenges, there may be even really like tragic moments or really humiliating moments, but it's all like leading to something, like it's all leading like towards this integral whole. And then when you look back at it, like it's telling like a very beautiful story, like a story of like triumph, or a story of love conquers all, but there's always some message that's sort of holding it together. And I understand that real life is not that neat, that it's not, like there's this beginning, middle, and end. But I think we can kind of look at it through the sense of kind of seeing the bigger picture, right? And seeing the larger meaning behind everything. And it's all, I think it comes back to it's all kind of what we make out of the experiences. And because I used to think when I first learned about manifestation, I was like, oh, it's this cool trick where I can just create the experiences I want, and then I can just exclude everything that I don't want from my reality. Right? But it's more like being able, and well, also I realize now when I think about it that that would actually be really boring if life were actually like that. And if you could just like control everything, and if everything was just completely smooth, and it was always just like a very, yeah, a very kind of clear line from A to B. And just like a story would be very boring if there were no challenges and no conflict. Um, and so, yeah, I think it's all kind of what you make out of the different experiences.
Again, it's much more empowering then too, isn't it?
Exactly.
As opposed to like, being so dead set on a certain ideal, a certain goal, and being like, well, I've failed
Hmm.
unless I get the goal, and until I've achieved the goal, I have failed. As opposed to just jumping right in without any of that judgment and just seeing, well, this is where I'm at. We're seeing where I'm
Hmm.
going, and
Hmm.
like I'm expecting the best, but like I know there's probably going to be some twists and turns and some ups and downs, but like not to judge yourself for that
Hmm.
as something that is deficient in you. And again,
Exactly.
this is something that the manifesting community, generally speaking, struggles with in large, because it's so results oriented.
Hmm.
And like you hear about so many things in life, if you don't enjoy the process, I just don't know if it's worth doing, because
Exactly.
people don't like me saying this, but manifesting significant changes for things you really care about is usually hard. People say that's a limiting belief, blah, 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 blah. I don't care. Like, I don't see enough proof from most people, at least, including myself, that like huge manifestations when it comes to things like, health, family, money, jobs, that we can just easily make those shifts, all the time. No way. It's challenging. It's hard. So if you hate that process or dislike that process and are just going for the end and will not be satisfied until you get to the end, you are setting yourself up for a very miserable time in your life. While if you look at it, if you start to enjoy the process and know what you want, have a specific focus if you want. I don't think either of us are saying you need a specific focus, but have that focus if you want, then it unfolds in a much more non-judgmental way. Again, it's just like, I don't know what, I think so many of us are self-judgmental, overly self-judgmental, and like, I just feel better when I'm not as
Oh,
self-judgmental.
absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, when it comes to self judgment, like I definitely fell into that for a long time. I still kind of fall into those lines of thinking occasionally. And, but for me, it always comes back to like like how do you even, so to give you an example, so for like a long time, like the better part of last year, like I lost my job and then, or one of my major clients, and then I was really kind of struggling to find a new client and a new source of income. And so I saw myself like as a failure and as a loser. And I was like, well, why, how do you even, define those terms in the first place? It's all just kind of like arbitrary. And whether it's the amount of money that we have in our bank account or like how much you weigh or how many friends you have, these are all just kind of like arbitrary numbers. But yet we're basing our value like on these numbers. And and everybody's, when it comes to, let's just take the example of income, everybody's example of what would be like a fulfilling income is like different anyway. And different countries kind of have different standards for what's considered like a sustainable amount to live on. And so like the only person that can define that is me. And then on top of that, kind of looking, when I did get like a new client and a new, sustainable source of income, I was kind of coming up with all these reasons for like why it still wasn't acceptable in my eyes. I was like, oh well, it could end at any time. And then I was like, well, it- just specifically kind of in the manifestation area, like what does it even take to be able to kind of claim your manifestation trophy? And I see this mostly like in comments as well. Like for instance, let's say that somebody, they ended a relationship and for a long time they wanted to be with, they wanted their ex back or whatever, but then they found somebody else that they felt more aligned with. And then somebody might write in the comments, they might say something like, oh well, that wasn't like a true manifestation success, you were just like settling. It's like, who even like comes up with these rules in the first place? It's so ridiculous. Like at the end of the day, it just, as long as you're doing what makes you happy, I mean, that should be what matters.
It's that trophy idea. That's
Hmm.
such a, I wonder, part of me wonders if that's like a recent thing.
Hmm.
Like if like The Secret and stuff made it like that. Like I wonder like even in like the 1980s and 90s if people were talking about manifestation in that way. Like let alone like in like 100 years ago. I don't think people were like with that kind of like
Exactly.
trophy mentality. And
Hmm.
like I think that makes me realize like I don't think I believe in manifesting in that way. Like I
Yeah,
don't think like with that, because you will never get the trophy. Like,
exactly.
what the trophy is? You die. It's over. It's like it doesn't work like that. Like it's like that's not what it's about, and that's so
Hmm.
different than like what you were talking about, like when you're dancing and you feel it, or like we're moving and we feel more alive. That's the manifest. That's the trophy.
Hmm.
It's right now. It's like when you're in flow.
Exactly.
That's right now. Like that.
Yeah.
That's the real trophy, and it's like that's what people don't get. It's like
Hmm.
it's not the external thing. I think you've spoken about this before. I've certainly spoken about it, where I've often manifested things that like in that I wanted, right? That like a
Mhm.
year or two before, I'm like, oh, this would be a big deal. I get them and I'm like over it. I'm like, oh, whatever.
Totally.
Or like, I don't even care. Or like, oh, that's
Yeah.
not enough. Or like, what, you know what I
Mhm,
mean? Like,
exactly.
um, and so it's so stupid, right? Like, and that's why, like, I said, like, I often like forget. So like some of my big manifestations, I like basically forget about them. People have to
Same.
remind me because it's like,
Mhm,
that's not for me, my approach to these ideas and to
mhm,
manifesting in general. My approach is what we're talking about, where it's like I feel alive, I feel in flow, like I feel
mhm.
like, and like I know I'm creating and embodying my life in a more fulfilling way by doing that. Like that's my
Exactly.
barometer. That's how I can check to see if things are going okay. It's not like, oh, has this showed up in the mail yet? Like, you know, has this person told me this? Or I just, and
Yeah,
again,
like
yeah, it can work for some people. That's all I was going to
mhm,
say, but
yeah.
not for a lot, not for a lot
Yeah.
of us.
Yeah, I mean, so much of it, it's just gotten ridiculous, like, oh, manifesting getting a text message from a person or, having somebody that you despise tell you how great you are, and then you're like, "Oh, look what I did," or seeing a purple butterfly or whatever, like
Right. It's so random. Like that's
Yeah.
not what this is about, I don't think. And again, it's cool if you think that is what it's about, if you're very
Mhm.
results oriented. I
Yeah.
mean, that works for some people,
Mhm.
especially like really business oriented people in a certain way, I guess. But
Yeah.
yeah. Um, yeah, I wanted to ask you too. I know you made a video about this, and you mentioned to me that you joined Joseph Rodriguez's mastermind.
Mhm.
And I saw that he was offering that. I thought that was really cool because for those of you who don't know, I assume most of you who do have watched this far do know, you know, Joseph is probably like the OG in the YouTube space. Like he's created more genuinely creative LOA content in the past 10 years. Like he was the founding father of making like interesting YouTube videos about these concepts, in my opinion, that I know of. So I was excited to see um, that he was offering something like that. So I was just wondering, you know, I know you said you've had some positive experiences, just your kind of your take on that. And, you know, if some people watching would want to maybe, you know, join if it would fit their sensibilities or whatever.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Like, he very much, like, practices what he preaches, and 100%. And what I always resonated the reason that I resonated with his videos so much is because it's not dogmatic. It's and in fact, he will any spec I mean, there's always, like, the underlying principle, right, of kinda going back to who you are. And he has specific language that he uses, like love, harmony, delight. And delight is one that I really like because it's like a kind of a play on words where he's taking like light, like God consciousness or illumination, and then kind of turning it into the word delight. And so yeah, it's always kind of coming back to who you are, but there are infinite ways to go about doing that. And so he'll always like provide like a lot of approaches. And he does the same thing in our mastermind as well. And so somebody will bring up an issue that they're experiencing and he'll give some suggestions. And if the suggestions don't really like resonate with that person, then he'll basically just keep going and keep trying new approaches until the person is satisfied. And so like I really appreciate and that and one thing in particular he said that's really kind of stuck with me is like the distinction between perfectionism and nuance. And so perfectionism is always kind of thinking like this is never good enough and never being satisfied. And which I think also kind of relates to what we were talking about, like the constantly changing goalpost and never being able to claim your trophy. And whereas nuance is basically kind of recognizing, okay, well, there's this these universal core principles, but then there's kind of infinite textures and shades that we can interpret it. And and that can be nuances as far as various spiritual principles that you integrate into your own life. It could be like in your business, different business strategies that you use. So it just goes on and on and on. But I really appreciate that distinction. And I appreciate too that it's that he never, and this is both in the mastermind and in his content as well, like he doesn't, even though he might kind of come up with, I mean, he's told us in the group that he's kind of had fun using his marketing knowledge to come up with sort of like off the cuff, thumbnails and titles, but like he never promises like quick fixes, like, oh, manifest your SP in 3 days or whatever. And because the idea is I wouldn't even say that it's about the journey and not the destination. It's really like the journey and the destination are one. And so the whole idea is like having this flow-based experience where it's not even so much, yes, you definitely want to get results, but it's not just about the results being an end in themselves. And it's about kind of enjoying every step of the process and really seeing everything as an opportunity for expansion. And yeah, and so even perceived failures, like maybe your launch didn't go the way that you expected, maybe somebody rejects you, or and then even kind of going like a meta layer beneath that, and then you react negatively to that experience, and then you're kind of feeling bad about yourself because of it. But all of those can be opportunities to bring you back to yourself. And so I think that's what it all comes down to, is just kind of expanding into more and more of who you are. And this actually reminds me too of a recent video from Neville Goddess, where she talks about, so often a lot of this content, at least the modern manifestation teachings, are kind of, a lot of them are preaching, do this technique and then money will just like appear in your bank account. And well, definitely that can certainly happen. Part of the joy and the pleasure is actually being able to actualize your vision. And so, more often, what would probably happen is once you start kind of integrating these principles into your life, then you become more open to opportunities. And so you start seeing opportunities, whereas before you might not have seen these opportunities, or you might have been too jaded or whatever to act upon the opportunities. And so that's where the real joy comes from, is the process, and really kind of being able to bring your vision out into the world.
Well said. Yeah, and I'm not surprised that Joseph is, talking in the mastermind about things in that way, because I know he of all the people on YouTube I've ever seen, he's more about enjoying the journey. He
Exactly.
harps on that in a good way all the time. And that's why he's the OG. I mean, you just mentioned probably the two most prominent YouTube manifesting people of all time, Joseph
Yes.
and Maggie. The Yeah, so that's very cool. People should definitely check that out. I also saw that he was doing some Emily Katie videos, which I was pleased to see that he was doing some of
Yes,
those.
absolutely.
Yeah, because
Yeah, and I immediately thought of your videos as well on Ancient Emily Katie.
she's so
Mhm.
appreciated.
Totally.
Um, yeah, I mean, it's so nice to talk to you always, and it's so interesting. Um, just speak to someone like yourself who's so much into just like the day-to-day, like do I feel good, like am I in flow, like am I viscerally, like do I feel in tune with what I'm doing, like there's just so much openness and freedom there, like again, the judgment falls, and you feel like, okay, I can if I do want to focus on a big long-term project, I have the space to do that now. Because for me, like I just know, and maybe it's again my artistic sensibilities or whatever, like if I feel too much pressure, I'm not going to produce usually as well as when I don't feel the pressure. If I feel like there's something that I should do today, but I don't feel like I have to do it right away, and like but I should do it, I'll do it right away. It'll be better than if I feel like I have to do it. Like I won't
Mhm.
force it. It will just naturally come. And I always just get the vibe like that's just how you create, and like how you work with people and how you write.
Absolutely.
It's so interesting, like again, comparing this to the results based stuff. My friend Marvin and I have been doing a lot of we started our SP coaching
Mhm.
program a couple months ago, trying to do like real SP coaching, because we had like one of these obvious Adams moments when we're like, wait a minute, like instead of just like bashing SP coaching. Why don't we just offer real SP coaching where like
I
it
like
is,
that.
where it's really like, more, it's all about integration. And of
Mhm.
course, even more so, our biggest word has been nuance. It's like, this is
Yes.
all about, because
Mhm.
if you don't appreciate the gray, the nuances of your, every personal relationship, but specifically your romantic relationships and the process of that, if you don't
Mhm.
appreciate that stuff and think of it black and white only, like I'm going to manifest my SP or not, or I'm going to succeed or fail, it's just a recipe for disaster. Because even if you do manifest that specific person, as they say, then you have to deal with that.
Exactly. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. And it is interesting. And, there is an argument to be made. I know Maggie's made this argument many times that like, there's so much manifesting content online now that like people will find their place. Like the people that
Mhm.
are like serious about finding more about these ideas and really integrating them in a more of a nuanced way, they will find the content. They will find Joseph, they will find Maggie. They'll
Mhm.
find that information. But the people that want to stay surface level and get quick results will find that. That's what they will
Exactly.
attract.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
um, you know, there's only so much conversion you can do there, because there's some people that's all they're going to be looking for. They're not, they wouldn't even regard what we're talking about now as being a manifesting conversation,
Exactly.
which we're both very comfortable with. But like,
Yeah.
but it's, yeah, it is interesting. Like
Mhm.
I definitely, I feel like I'm triggering more people than ever with this SP stuff. Cause like, I just think some of the best manifestation advice that you can give when it comes to like relationships or business stuff is like, go out and take action, like do something
Exactly.
to take, communicate, or like, make, put yourself out there. Um, and that was never seen as being wrong, I don't think, in most circles until, again, recently. I don't know, I want to say the last 20 years, or I don't know, maybe it's been longer. But even Neville, like there's no way when he said you won't have to lift a finger that he meant do nothing. I mean,
Mhm.
all those stories
Yeah.
in the power of awareness and the law and the promise, the people are still doing things. It's just
Mhm.
they're not directly related to manifesting the goal and,
Mhm.
A goes to B. It's more like, all right, we'll do A, we'll just, see, we'll do what we have to do, what the day brings, and then B kind of naturally unfolds from there. So
Yes, absolutely, for sure. Yeah, I appreciate the conversations that you and Marvin have been having, and I believe in one of them that you were talking about the very concept of, yeah, being successful in relationships. It's not just about saying a bunch of affirmations or doing a scene or whatever. Like sometimes it's actually like going out there and meeting people, which it's so funny because it seems like so obvious.
so
I
obvious
think
people
a
don't
lot of
do it.
people overlook that.
Exactly. I mean, we've spoken to a lot of people who, not necessarily who become clients, but like literally their problem is they just have not communicated how they felt to the person they want to be with. Like it's like, okay, have you even texted them, or like let alone like had a phone conversation or sent them a letter? And it's like, well, no, I just have been affirming and visualizing. It's like, oh my gosh, you've been doing this for 6 months. You could have texted them or called them the next week and had this at least figured out where you were. Instead, it's six months or whatever of just
Mhm.
waiting and agonizing and potentially making the situation worse. Um, a little bit of common sense, a little bit of obvious Adams goes a long way,
Mhm.
and yeah, I'm curious too. Are you still writing your book, or is that on hiatus, or your novel? I knew you were working on a novel last time we spoke.
Oh, yes, yes. There's a couple that I've been working on, and one of them, I believe the one that we probably spoke about, right? Just Go For It. And so, yeah, that's
I don't know. I
actually
didn't know that was the title. I love that title.
it's yeah, that I am still working on that, and it's in the editing. Currently, my editor is editing the latest draft of it, and but yes, I feel that fiction, and specifically this book, has been like a great tool for me of, so we hear about this idea, right, of kind of writing your ideal life into existence and like just say the word. And I feel like writing fiction is one of the most powerful ways to do that because in a fictional story, obviously it takes on like a lot of dimensions and a lot of texture and nuance, and it just becomes a lot more vivid. And so, so it's a so I take a character, and it's and some of it is issues that I've dealt with recently, and some of them issues that I no longer, thankfully, like a part of my life, but certainly things that I think a lot of people will be able to relate to. But she starts like the very low point in her life, and uh, a point where she feels like nothing is really going to change. She's just kind of settling for mediocrity, I guess is the best way to put it. And then she has an experience very much like Alice in Wonderland, where she kind of goes down the rabbit hole, only this time it's more metaphorical. And she she realizes that life can change very dramatically overnight, and you can change your identity. But then I think like many of us, even when we go through these very profound transformations, we don't know exactly what to do with it. And so she goes from just like despising herself and thinking that nobody will ever love her, even want to be involved with her, period, into all of a sudden kind of feeling like on top of the world. But it becomes kind of too much like in the opposite direction. And all of a sudden she's kind of, looking for love in all the wrong places. And it's this very, I guess, kind of, well, Maxwell Maltz talks about it very well, I think, in the when he talks about like the inspiration for psychocybernetics, right? That when he would do plastic surgery, that people would experience this very typically like a momentary like boost in confidence, but then that would eventually like fade because who they were like underneath it hadn't really changed. How they related to themselves hadn't really changed. And so like all so with my character, like all this insecurities are still there, like underneath the surface. And yeah, and it's through the process of kind of making all, I guess, what we might consider to be like bad decisions, but really they're good decisions, right? Because they kind of help her to really kind of discover like who she is and what she truly wants. And so I definitely feel like it's something, yeah, just a message that a lot of people can relate to. And because the highs, because sometimes in fiction, right, it can be very dramatic, and the highs and the lows are so big. I think it can almost kind of help you to jar you in an even bigger way than let's say just watching a video or whatever.
It's so much more immersive, I feel like.
Immersive, exactly.
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah, that's great. Well, we look forward to reading it when it comes.
Well,
You
thank
have to let
you.
us know. Yeah, you have to come back on for a book
Yes,
promo. Go
thank
for
you.
it.
And
That's great. Yeah, and
and one
yeah,
thing that just
are,
kind of comes to
go ahead.
mind, actually kind of relating that to the whole SP conversation, and specifically kind of looking at people that really want to be with a specific person, even if that person treats them really bad. And I can relate to this because I was in that position once too. And it's kind of, I think it's, you have to take a moment to ask the question, well, why do you want to be with that person in the first place? And usually something, when you really get, at least for me, when I really got honest with myself, it comes down to, being afraid of being alone. Like, oh, it might not be that great with this person, but then if that ends, then I won't have anybody. And so yeah, so I think in whether it's, yeah, a specific person or money or whatever it is that you're trying to manifest, I think you always kind of want to look at what it's revealing about yourself as well.
For sure. I mean, that's in a way what's the real value, or so much of the value is what's projected. Um, what's interested me with working with so many SP people recently is that you realize most of our most of the work that people want to do around manifesting, even if it's for something totally non-relationship or, oriented, whether like, they want more money or a better job or better health or whatever, for whatever reason, it's probably because it's so personal and it's about how we react to others. The SP stuff seems to like bring out all these underlying issues. Like it's like, you're working with someone on like a relationship issue, but like it's like, oh, it's bringing out like the stuff that when I've worked with people about finances or about their job or their health, it's like it's the same deep, you could say deep wounds or deep trauma, but like the same deep stuff that we have to look at. It's just with the SP stuff, it seems to be more intense, a lot more in your face. You know what I mean? Because of the relationship element of it. And often people projecting certain ideals or ideas on the person they want, and then realizing, oh my gosh, it's me. You know what I mean? What is it really saying about me? About, not wanting to be alone, or, not being good enough. If I don't have this person, I'm never gonna have anybody better, So it's fascinating. And all roads seem to go back to the same destination or whatever,
Exactly.
like when it comes to that creative process. So, but yeah, your book sounds really interesting. And also it's, again, such writing, a fiction, but people, especially I would encourage people who are like journalers or whatever, like if you want journaling like on steroids or something like that, try to like write a novel or something, or like when you get into your characters like that, like you say, it's, obviously when you're reading it, but more so when you're writing it, you really get to embody it. And like as an artist, whether it's like, if you're making a movie or directing a play or, whatever it may be, to get to really personify. I think that's why some people like to act, is they really get to personify some part of them that's hidden. Not necessarily like a shadow part, but just like an aspect of them that they usually don't get to present, that now they get to not only present, but really explore thoroughly as they present it. Which is why, the creative process is so fun to kind of intermingle with these ideas, and why I think both of us relate to it much more than like the scientific aspect, which is again fine, but like the math and scientific aspect of this, where people are like, oh, it's just like an equation, I can never relate to as much as like what we're discussing, where it's like, well, it's like this emotional narrative arc, you know what I mean? Like,
totally.
Yeah. Always great talking to you, Kate.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and we can find you at your YouTube channel, Generate Magic, and your website's just generatemagic.com, correct?
Exactly. Yes.
Awesome. Yeah, you'll have to come back when the book comes out or before. And be sure to check out Kate's channel if you have not. She's got some of the more unique insights into flow and manifestation and non-dogmatism that we have here on the YouTube. So until next time, everybody, enjoy, and we'll see you again soon. Bye.